All right, so get this. Today we are diving into some pretty steamy waters.
Ooh, sounds intriguing.
We're talking about Black Erotica, erotic adult short stories written by Black women.
Okay, I'm listening.
It's this anthology that's been making quite a stir on Amazon.
Really? What's so special about it?
Well, for starters, it's available in Kindle, audiobook, and paperback.
So basically, no excuse not to check it out.
Exactly. But what's really interesting is the author's intention behind it.
Go on.
Jade St. James, the author, wanted to create a collection of erotic stories specifically by Black women for Black women.
You know, that's actually really important.
Right. And she's very upfront about it.
Like, how so?
Well, in the book's description, she straight up says, I don't know if you've noticed, but it's hard to find erotic books and audiobooks by Black women for Black women.
Yeah, I can see that.
And then she goes on to say, I decided to fix that.
I love that. It's like she's taking matters into her own hands.
Totally. And it goes beyond just filling a gap in the market.
What do you mean?
It's about owning one's narrative, especially when it comes to sexuality.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So we've got representation, but what about the actual content?
Yeah, spill the tea.
Well, let me tell you, this anthology doesn't hold back.
Okay, give me the rundown.
We're talking older, younger relationships, BDSM, first times, anal sex, groups, you name it.
Whoa, hold on, there's more.
Oh yeah, we're just getting started. There's also cuckolding, gangbangs, MFM, lesbian relationships.
Wow, okay, this is quite the collection.
And get this, there are even some paranormal fantasies thrown in for good measure.
Paranormal fantasies, now that's something you don't see every day.
I know, right? That's what really caught my eye.
It makes you wonder, what's the significance of that?
Well, it's not your typical erotica trope.
True.
So I'm wondering if it suggests a willingness to push boundaries.
Yeah, maybe even explore the intersection of desire and the supernatural.
Exactly. What do you think?
I think that's where the true significance of this anthology lies. It's not just about providing representation, it's about challenging the existing norms of what Black female sexuality is allowed to be.
Like it's saying, hey, we're here, we're complex, and our desires are multifaceted.
Right. And that's a powerful message, especially in a genre that's often been dominated by a very specific perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And from the looks of it, that message is resonating.
How so?
The reviews on Amazon are overwhelmingly positive.
Really?
Yeah, the book has a 4.3 out of 5-star rating.
Wow, that's impressive.
One reviewer even said, finally, a great book for US.
You can practically hear the relief and validation in that statement.
Totally. It speaks to a hunger for authenticity, for stories that reflect the lived experiences of Black women.
And that's exactly what Jade St. James is aiming to satisfy.
Now, I did notice that some reviewers mentioned flaws in the writing.
Oh, like what?
Things like abrupt perspective shifts and unresolved endings.
Interesting.
So I'm curious, do you think those criticisms detract from the book's overall message?
That's a good question.
Or are they just growing pains for a genre that's still evolving?
Well, that's something to think about. You know, before the break, we were talking about how Black Erotica could be like this catalyst for change.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, do you think this could spark a whole new wave of erotic literature?
Ooh, definitely, maybe specifically for Black women.
Right. It's like opening a door that's been closed for far too long.
I know.
And just imagine all the amazing stories and voices that are waiting to be heard out there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And we've already seen how excited readers are about this anthology.
And that enthusiasm, I think, that translates into demand, which hopefully then translates into more opportunities for Black women to share their stories.
It makes you wonder what kind of impact that could have.
Yeah, definitely.
Not just on the world of erotica, but on how we perceive Black female sexuality as a whole.
I mean, think about it. It's a chance to really reshape the narrative, you know? And move beyond stereotypes and present a more authentic portrayal of Black women's desires and experiences.
It's something that's been missing, wouldn't you say?
For sure.
I mean, for so long, erotica has been dominated by a certain perspective.
Yeah.
And it's left very little room for stories that really center on the experiences of Black women.
Oh, absolutely. But I think Black Erotica is a huge step towards correcting that imbalance.
It's about reclaiming narratives, challenging societal norms, and ultimately centering Black female pleasure and agency. Which is incredibly important, right?
Oh, without a doubt.
Because representation in erotica isn't just about seeing yourself in the story.
It's about feeling validated, empowered.
and seen as a whole person with complex desires.
Absolutely. And I think that's why this book is really resonating with so many readers.
It's providing a space for those desires to be explored.
And celebrated without judgment.
This might seem like a bit of a jump.
Okay. Yeah.
Reading about some of the themes in Black Erotica, like the older-younger relationships, it reminded me of this conversation I had with a friend who loves age gap romance novels.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And she was saying how these types of stories allow her to kind of explore power dynamics and societal expectations in a safe space.
I see.
Do you think the same could be true for readers of Black Erotica?
That's a fascinating observation, and I think it speaks to the power of erotica as a genre.
Okay.
It can be more than just, titillation. It can be a way to engage with these really complex themes.
And kind of challenge those societal norms.
Right, in a way that's both provocative and insightful.
So Black Erotica isn't just about creating a more inclusive literary landscape.
Right.
It's also potentially starting these really important conversations.
Exactly, about relationships, power dynamics, and even societal expectations.
Yeah, that's really powerful.
It is.
Now, beyond Black Erotica, have you noticed any other trends in erotica that suggest a shift towards more diversity and inclusion?
Definitely. There's a growing movement to embrace a wider range of voices and experiences.
Like what kind of stuff?
Well, we're seeing more anthologies featuring LGBTQ+ authors.
Oh, cool.
Stories that explore diverse body types and relationships.
Awesome.
And a greater emphasis on consent and healthy sexuality.
It sounds like erotica is finally catching up to the broader conversation about representation and inclusivity.
Yeah, it's about time, right?
It really is. And it's so exciting to see the genre evolve in such a positive direction.
But the question is, will mainstream publishers take notice?
Right. And will they create space for these diverse voices?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah, I mean, the success of independently published anthologies like Black Erotica could put pressure on these bigger publishing houses.
Yeah, to become more inclusive in their offerings.
It's like a wake-up call showing them there's a huge audience out there.
Who are hungry for stories that reflect their own experiences.
And those audiences have purchasing power.
Right.
So when readers support diverse content, publishers are more likely to pay attention. So what can we as readers and consumers do to support this movement? I mean, we can't just sit back and hope the industry changes on its own right.
You're absolutely right. We have to be proactive.
Okay, so what can we do?
Well, first and foremost, we need to actively seek out and support authors from marginalized communities.
I like that.
Buy their books, leave reviews, and spread the word.
That's a great point. And it's not just about buying the book. It's about engaging with it, talking about it, and sharing it with others.
Precisely. And don't be afraid to have those conversations about diversity and representation in erotica.
I agree.
Talk to your friends, share your favorite books on social media.
Challenge those who might have outdated views about the genre.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture of awareness and appreciation for the vast spectrum of human sexuality.
And ultimately demanding more from the stories we consume.
Right. We deserve to see ourselves in those stories.
Okay, so let's circle back to the book.
Back to Black Erotica.
Yes, we've talked about the diverse themes, but I think it's worth revisiting the impact of that variety.
Yeah. What does it say about Black female sexuality as a whole?
I mean, the fact that this anthology covers everything from tender romance to more hardcore scenes, it really speaks to the complexity of desire.
And it breaks down those limiting stereotypes.
Right, the ones that often surround Black women and their sexuality.
It's like saying, hey, we're not a monolith.
Yes.
We experience desire in all its complexity, and we're not afraid to explore it.
I love that. And one of the reviews I read mentioned how the writing in Black Erotica was detailed enough that you could visualize the experience, but still left room for interpretation.
I think that's such a great observation.
It really speaks to the skill of these authors.
They're crafting these vivid and engaging narratives.
But they're not being overly prescriptive.
They're inviting the reader to participate in the imaginative process.
And to fill in the gaps with their own desires and fantasies.
Right, and that's what makes erotica so powerful.
It's this collaborative experience between the author and the reader.
The words on the page are just the starting point.
And then the reader's imagination takes it from there.
Exactly. And that collaborative element is so important in a genre like erotica.
Which is so closely tied to our personal fantasies and desires.
Now, I do want to acknowledge that we've been focusing on the positive, but not all of the reviews were glowing.
Right.
For example, one reviewer mentioned the abrupt perspective shifts,
Oh, yeah.
which they found jarring.
Well, multiple perspectives can definitely enrich a story,
Oh, for sure.
but it's important to handle those transitions smoothly.
Right, you don't want the reader to feel lost or confused.
And another reviewer mentioned that some of the stories ended abruptly, without a clear resolution.
Oh, right, particularly the one about the ghost.
Yeah, that one really stood out to me.
It's not every day you see a paranormal fantasy in a collection of erotic stories.
It definitely caught my attention too, but it's a shame to hear that the ending didn't quite live up to the premise.
Well, with anthologies, there are always going to be stories that resonate more strongly than others.
That's true.
And that's okay. It's part of what makes anthology so interesting.
You get to experience a variety of styles and voices.
And you're bound to find some real gems along the way.
It's like a buffet of erotic delights.
A buffet of erotic delights. I like that.
With something for everyone.
Okay, before we get too carried away with the food metaphors, shall we move on to our final thoughts on Black Erotica?
Sounds good to me. All right. So we're back and ready to kind of wrap things up with Black Erotica.
It's been quite a journey.
It has, hasn't it?
Yeah, lots to unpack.
We've talked about representation, challenging those norms.
And even thrown in some food metaphors along the way.
Exactly. So now I think it's time to zoom out a bit. And consider the bigger picture. What does the success of Black Erotica tell us about erotica as a whole?
It feels like maybe a turning point.
Yeah, right.
Like readers are ready for something new.
Yeah, more than just the same old stories and perspectives.
Exactly. They're looking for stories that reflect real experiences, especially when it comes to sexuality.
There's this hunger for authenticity, for stories that push boundaries and, challenge the way things are.
And Black Erotica shows just how powerful those stories can be.
It's like sending a message to the whole publishing industry.
What kind of message?
Like, hey, there's so much potential out there. There are voices and stories that deserve to be heard.
And people are ready and waiting for them.
And this anthology proves that people want to hear these voices and stories.
It's a good reminder that erotica can be a platform for social commentary.
Yeah, for challenging norms and for celebrating diversity.
And what's really refreshing about Black Erotica is how it explores the complexities of Black female sexuality.
Right. It embraces desire and pleasure in a way that feels real and empowering.
It celebrates Black womanhood.
And it shows the power of owning your own story, especially when it comes to something as personal as sexuality.
So I guess as we wrap up this deep dive, we should leave you with something to think about.
Absolutely. So here's a final question for you. What does the success of this book, with all of its bold themes and stories, tell us about the need for diverse voices in storytelling as a whole?
That's a really great question, and it goes way beyond just erotica. It's about recognizing that everyone deserves to see themselves in the stories they read.
And these stories can really shape how we see the world.
And our place in it.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So if you're intrigued by what you've heard today,
and want to explore these themes even further,
I highly recommend checking out Black Erotica for yourself.
You might just discover a whole new world of erotic literature.
And remember, you have the power to change the narrative.
As readers, as consumers, and as advocates for diversity and inclusion.
We have the power to shape the future of storytelling and make sure everyone's voice is heard.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning.